Hi everyone, and welcome to this review note. In this clip, we're going to be working on the Users and Groups lab for Linux, and we're going to be doing Task 2, which is creating an account for ourselves that's going to have full admin rights on the system so that we don't have to log in with root all the time. So let's get started with that. First thing we're going to do is create ourselves a user account. So if you remember, we do user add. I'm going to use, actually, before I put my username in, I'm going to put in a comment so I can put my full name in. So I'm going to do -C, and then I'm going to say Jim Dixon. I'm going to put that in quotes because since there's a space in my name, we don't want Unix or Linux to think that we've ended one thing and started with another. Space, and then my username, first initial, last name. Do we have to put the comment in? No, but it makes great documentation so that if somebody's looking for the password file, they can figure out who's who, in case we have a couple of usernames that are very, very similar. I'll hit enter. My user should be created. We'll do a couple checks. So if I do a tail of my etc and password file, password file, there's my user account down at the end there. You can see the comment in the middle where it says Jim Dixon. I'm going to check group just to make sure that my personal group has been created. Tail, and then etc and group. And again, looking down at the bottom there, you can see my personal group with the GID that matches my UID. Now, the other thing we want to do is be able to log in with this account. So one of the things I'm going to do with that is set my password. So I'm going to set the password on the J Dixon account, and I'll set that to our ever-present secret 55. So that group is now going to be in a position that we can actually use it when we're ready. To verify that, I'm going to do a tail /etc/shadow. And sure enough, down at the bottom there, very last record, you can see my name. We don't have the double exclamation mark, so that means that my password has already been set. Awesome. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a group for IT admins. And we're going to use best practices as far as the group ID is concerned. Now, one of the things we may not know is what is going to be the next group ID. If I do a tail or anything else like that to show etc and group, somewhere buried in all that information is going to be the largest GID. Now, we know from just a few minutes ago that's going to be 60,002. You can see that about 5-6 lines up from the bottom there. But in a large file, that's going to be pretty difficult to find. So let me show you a little trick. We do something called sort. When we sort, if you don't have white space separating the fields apart, then we have to tell it what that separator is. Now, in this case, the field separator is a colon. So I'm going to do -T and then a colon. And then I want to sort numerically. So I'm going to do an N. And I want to also specify which column that I want to sort on. That's going to be the third one in, which is going to be the numeric value for the group ID. So I'll just say K3. And then I have to specify my file. So I'm going to say /etc/group. So what's this going to do? So it says I'm going to sort the file for you. I'm going to look in column 3. The -N says I'm going to do it numerically. Now what that prevents is something like a 60,000 coming after before 999, because the first value is a 6. So that would be like an alphabetic sort. So by doing numerically, it takes all of the digits that are going to be in the column into account. And once again, the different columns or the fields are separated by a colon. So the -T colon specifies what our field separator is. Let's hit enter. And right down at the very bottom, we see that 60,002. So that is our highest value. So I know that my next group ID is going to be 60,003. So I'm going to say group add, and then this is going to be IT-admins. Before I do that, once again, I have to remember to do -G, 60,003. So I know for sure that I'm going to be using my numbering best practices for GIDs. I'll hit enter, and my group is created. So that's my second step done. I also want to add my user into that IT admins group. So once again, I'm going to say user mod, if you remember, because we have to modify the user to add it to the group, capital G, and then this is going to be IT admins for my account. And if we just want to make sure that's good, I'm just going to tail etc and group. And we'll see down at the bottom there, we've got IT admins. It has a group ID of 60,003, and it has my user account as the member. Awesome. So that takes care of the second step. Now, what we have to do is we want to make this group so that it has administrative rights, and therefore all of the users who are members of that group also get full administrative rights. To do that, we have to modify the sudoers file, and we're going to do that with vi sudo. So I'm going to say vi sudo, and that will start editing this file for me. I'm going to go right down to the bottom of this file. Oops. And I'm going to add a line in at the bottom once I arrive there. All right, so I'm just going to go to the end of the line and then go into the insert mode, and I'll add a new line in underneath this. Now, what I want to do is I want to say I'm going to allow the group, so I have put a percent sign on the front of that, and the group is IT-admins. Once I've done that, I want this to be unrestricted. So I want to be able to run this from all systems. I want this to apply to all of the different users who have admin rights in the first place, so it doesn't matter who I pick. And then I want them to be able to run all commands. So I'm going to say all systems equals all eligible users, and then all commands. So basically completely unrestricted access to this system. I am going to escape to get out of insert mode. I'm going to do :w quit so that that gets saved, and I'll exit out. So my sudoers file in etc has now been modified so that I'll be able to get in and work with that new user account. That's my next step. So let's get logged in with that user account. I'm going to come over and launch PuTTY so that I can connect in. I've got my connection already saved here. I'm going to put in my username for Jim Dixon. And as soon as this password prompt pops up here in a second, I will put in my password and I'll get logged in with my standard user account. I'm not quite sure why this is taking so long to prompt for password at the first time, but I'm now in. So I'm good to go from that perspective. Now I'm just going to drag this guy off over to the side here a little bit. Okay. So now what we want to do is test this. Do we have administrative rights? And the idea is we should only be able to do anything administratively if we use the sudo command. So let me try adding a user from a test perspective. We know that from a privilege perspective that we must have root rights to be able to add a user. So if I say user add, and I just call this test, I'm going to get an answer back, or a prompt back if you wish, response that says permissions denied. Okay, that's what we want to see. Now if I say sudo and the same thing, user add and then test, it is going to prompt me for my password and basically also giving me a bit of a warning that, hey, you know, if you're going to be using sudo, just be careful with this. I'll say secret 55 and we get the prompt back. There doesn't appear to be any kind of error. So if I do a quick test and I say I want to tail etc and then password, sure enough, down at the very bottom, there's my test account. So I've now proven that with my regular login I created, my JDixon login, as long as I use sudo I can basically execute the command with admin rights. And it's very important to recognize that only the command executes, in this case the user add command, executes with admin rights. So I need to sudo that every time. If I come back and say, hey, I want to do a user add test1, then when I execute that, it says permission denied. So I have to use sudo every single time that I want to execute some sort of privileged command from my standard account. As long as the entry in the sudoers file allows me to do what I'm trying to do, I'm in good shape for that, which is absolutely excellent. And again, this is a best practice. We typically don't want to be logged in with the root account unless we absolutely have to, because we run a much higher risk of making some change to the system that is going to cause damage when we weren't really necessarily paying a lot of attention to what we were doing. So we want to make sure always that we don't have an account that has more privileges than we need. And that is now it for that particular task and this lab. Wrap for the video. Hopefully this was helpful, and we'll see you next time.